Hi, welcome to Engineering 160A, Studio Session 1.2C, the sine wave program modifications. So what we're going to do is take the program we just created in the previous lesson, which created a sine wave, and do a couple of modifications to it. The first thing we're going to do is slow down the iterations in the while loop. If you remember, when we hit the run button, our sine wave was happening very, very fast that it was even hard to really tell that it was a sine wave. So we want to slow that down. The second thing we want to do is create a smoother sine wave by increasing the resolution of the sine function input values. Okay, let's open up our program. And here, let's recall, I'm going to run our program. And when I do that, you can see that the operations that are occurring in the while loop are happening at an extremely fast pace, and our sine wave is just flying through our screen here. So that's what we want to slow down. So let me stop the program, and let's look over at our block diagram. And what we can do to try and slow the rate down is add some sort of weight inside our while loop. So how do we do that? We right-click, get to our functions palette, and then we can go down to the sub-palette called timing. One of the icons in the timing sub-palette is a weight. So it says weight ms, which stands for milliseconds. So let's grab that and let's drop that into our while loop. And our input to this is the time to wait in milliseconds. So let's change that, and let's create a constant, and let's make that constant 100. So now this is just going to tell the computer to sit here in this one iteration for 100 milliseconds, or 0.1 seconds. Let me go back to my program. Let me clear off the previous data by right-clicking on the data, going to Data Operations, and Clear Chart. And now if I run the program, you can see that the data is coming in at a much slower rate because a new data point is generated now every 0.1 seconds compared to coming in at roughly 0.7 microseconds, which is the fastest that my computer can operate. So I've put that weight in there to tell the computer to slow down. Well, the next thing I want to do is, we said we wanted to improve the resolution. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, let me see if I can go ahead and try and change the scale here. Let me make this, instead of 1000, let me make it 100 and try and zoom in here. So now you can see my sine wave, but it looks kind of choppy. Let me stop the program. And you can see it looks something like a sine wave, but it's not really smooth at all. So why is that? Well, the reason for that is we don't really have good resolution between the values that are going in to generate the sine wave. And that's because if we go back to our block diagram, we have to remember that we're inputting the iteration loop number into the sine function. So what's that doing? That's saying, okay, the first time through the program, calculate the sine of 0, plot it, then come back and calculate the sine of 1, plot it, come back, calculate the sine of 2, plot it, all where the values 0, 1, and 2 are in radians. Well, to make it smoother, I can increase the resolution by just decreasing the values that go in. So instead of using 0, 1, 2, I can do something like 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and now I should be able to generate a much smoother curve. To better see the fact that we don't have high resolution in the graph, let's go and take a look at the front panel again. And now let's see if I can modify how the data is represented. Well, I can right-click up here where it's plotting the data, and I can change the properties. So instead, or if I wanted to, I can change the color. I can make it green, but let's leave it white for now. What I want to talk about is putting on points. So let me go down to point style, and now we have nothing or no points. And let me change that to put, let's say, these white circles. So now I see the white circles. These white circles are the locations where we actually have a data point. In between, LabVIEW is just connecting these points with straight lines. Okay, so we want to generate many more of these points where we're evaluating the sine wave, and that'll make everything look a bit smoother. Let's go ahead and increase the resolution. We said we want to, instead of having the values coming from my iteration number of 0, 1, 2, let's try and decrease that. Well, one easy way in which I can do that is, let's say I want 5 times more data points. Well, all I need to do then is take my iteration number and divide it by 5. Okay, so let me go to my functions palette and go to my numeric, find division, and let me take my iteration number and let me divide that by 5. So I can right click on the terminal and go to create constant and change that to 5. And now I'm going to take the output of that and make it the input to my sine function. Okay. So what's going to happen? The first time through the loop, I is going to be 0. 0 divided by 5 is 0, and 0 is going to be sent to the sine function. It's going to plot it, then it's going to come back around, start all over again after it's waited the 100 milliseconds. And then I is going to become 1. 1 divided by 5 is 0.2, and now it's going to send the value 0.2 into the sine function. Plot it, wait my 100 milliseconds, come back around, I becomes 2. 2 divided by 5 is 0.4, and now 0.4 comes in, and it is plotted. So let's go back to the front panel and now run this program and see how it looks. Right click, data operations, clear chart, run the program, and now we can see our sine wave, and it looks much more conventional and has many more points and appears much smoother. Let me go ahead and stop the program. There's still one more thing that we need to fix, and that is we need to rescale the x-axis. The x-axis is being plotted to the number that's in the array. So the first data point that comes in is plotted in 0. Then the next number that comes in is 1. The next number that comes in is 2. The next number is 3, so on and so forth. So this was perfectly fine, or did represent the actual x value that went into creating the sine function in our previous program before we increased the resolution, right? Because the first element was 0 and the value was 0. The second element was 1 and the value was 1. But now our first element is 0. But the second element, when the iteration number is 1, the actual value in the sine function is really 0.2. So the x that we're putting in is 0.2. So we need to go ahead and try and scale the axis. So how do we do that? We can go to right-click on the chart itself, and we can go down to Chart Properties. That brings up a window, and we can change to scales. And now our scaling factor, we can put a multiplier on that x-axis, and we want to have a multiplier of 0.2 because we have divided by 5, or 1 divided by 5 is 0.2. So now if we hit OK, and we can run the program, go to Data Operations, clear the chart, we can start all over, hit run, we start to build our sine wave, and let's give it a couple of runs here, stop the program, let me go back to looking at it from 0, and what do I notice? My x-axis is now scaled correctly because one complete sine curve, okay, is just above 6 on this graph, which we know is 2 pi, or 6.28. So it looks like we've scaled everything correctly, and this indeed gives us the right representation of our data.